Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, and welcome to another edition of the Pure Digital Passion Podcast with me, Moses Kemibaro. I'd like to start this conversation by saying that this man is somebody I met very recently, apparently through LinkedIn. And we then also discovered that we have mutual acquaintances, had a very nice coffee breakfast a couple of weeks ago. And we agreed, let's do this podcast. And, I'm so delighted to have him here because he's somebody who I think really has something important to say and something important to share. Somebody who's also a representative of the African diaspora with a strong background coming from West Africa and Cameroon, where he's based. But today's conversation really sits at the intersection of financial risk, consumer data, and Africa's economic future. We're going to be looking into seeing how Yannick Lefang, the founder and CEO of Kasi Insight, has created one of the Kenya's, or rather Africa's biggest leading decision intelligence company. And I think one of the things that he's going to do for us is break down what a decision intelligence company actually is. His path to building Kasi was unlike almost any other founder story that I've encountered in the African ecosystem when it comes to technology. He's an electrical engineer by training, which makes me wonder how he ended up in what he does today. He graduated cum laude from the University of Ottawa, where he spent a decade also at TD Bank in one of North America's largest financial institutions. He's also mastered market risk, understanding that, fair valuation, and also capital markets risk management, which is going to delve into a little bit when we have our conversation. He then also took that rigorous quantitative mindset to the IFC, the International Finance Corporation, which of course is part of the World Bank, advising banks and financial institutions across East, Southern, and West Africa on their risk frameworks. And from that vantage point, he spotted something that the global data industry had largely ignored. Africa had no reliable, high-frequency, pan-continental consumer intelligence in the form of a platform. And so in 2017, he decided to actually build one, which is what Kasi Insight is. Today, Kasi Insight tracks consumer sentiment, economic signals, and also brand performance and retail dynamics across 21 African markets, conducting over 120,000 interviews annually and generating, believe it or not, 80 million data points. The Kasi Index of Consumer Sentiment is distributed on Bloomberg and also Refinitiv, making it one of the very few Africa-originated economic indicators to sit alongside global financial data at that scale. The latest research, which is when consumers whisper, credit markets listen, makes a compelling case and also shifts in household confidence in Kenya, consistently predict changes in non-performing loans 1 to 3 quarters before those changes appear on bank balance sheets. It's the kind of work that deserves to be on the desk of every CRO, portfolio manager, and policymaker engaged with Africa's financial ecosystem, where, of course, of late we keep talking about financial inclusion and how platforms like mobile money and so forth are making this possible for many Africans. So we're going to unpack Yannick's journey, the founding logic behind Kasi, what decision intelligence actually means for African businesses, and the profound implications that research for banks, investors, and regulators stand across the continent through the work that he does. Yannick, welcome to Pure Digital Passion.
Thank you so much, Moses, and I'm so glad to be here.
So Yannick, we've got to get to the origins. Yeah, I know you're from West Africa, and I'm sure we're going to get into the debate around jollof rice, specifically from Cameroon. But let's talk about early days, growing up, how you ended up going from Cameroon to Canada and that sort of thing. Maybe you can start us there.
So thank you so much again. I'm so pleased to be here and so glad to have this conversation with you, Moses. I've been a big fan of your LinkedIn feed. Always very insightful. So I was actually born in France.
Oh, really? Okay. Let's go back that far. Okay.
Exactly. So I'm born in France, but then my parents sort of moved back when I was about 5, I believe, in Cameroon. So I grew up, so my sort of early child and sort of happened.
Does that mean you're a French citizen as well?
So that's another interesting story. Back in the day, my parents did not complete my French citizenship.
I see.
You had to be, and at the time you had to be sort of an adult or like 18 to be able to ask for it.
Yes.
Which I did, because at that point I'm in Canada.
I get you.
But at that point, the regulations and the rules have changed.
Okay.
So they made it very difficult for me to get it. And then I said, you know what?
No pressure,
right? But I grew up in Africa, grew up in Cameroon, grew up in a family of entrepreneurs. My grandfather is an entrepreneur. My grandmother is an entrepreneur. From the age of 12, I've been sort of running businesses literally.
Hang on, at 12?
Yeah, my grandfather will basically pick me because we were living in the capital city, Yaoundé.
Yes.
And then he was living in another smaller town. He would pick me up after school and sort of bring me And really, when you think about it, from the age of 12, my first summer, with my grandfather, working literally, they had a farm, a hardware store, a retail store, and really spending my first summer there was kind of tough, because my friends were enjoying themselves, going to movies, and here I was waking up at 6, exactly, hustling, and so it was tough at the beginning, but boy, oh boy, I am who I am today because of those years. And
those formative years,
every single year, every single vacation from 12 till I left Cameroon, I would spend there. Eventually, he started paying me, so I had a salary. Eventually, I started running one of the store when he was traveling.
Wow.
Yes, and so when I look back, I realize how forward-looking he was, because I mean, here I am, 13-year-old. I'm doing cash. I'm taking all of this money, bringing it to the bank, doing a deposit. And so you have this 13-year-old literally working on the street with stack of money in a bag. And of course, you think that's crazy, but who would think this 13-year-old or 14-year-old has so much money?
Would imagine that, yeah.
So at the same time, he was also very smart in a sense.
Yeah.
But very formative years, right? Work ethic, working hard.
Yes.
Really looking at what's essential. So I really learned those from my grandparents, and that was my sort of growing up in Cameroon. And then eventually, when I finished, I decided to go to Canada, and he was part of the reason also why I actually went to Canada.
Oh, really?
Because
okay.
Initially my parents wanted me to go to Europe, but he said at the time I had an uncle who was in Canada.
I see.
So he said, no, I want my grandson to go to a place where he can learn English. And I remember my parents saying, but Canada is too far. And him replying to them, way back when, because I'm originally from the west side of Cameroon.
Yes,
so we have sort of Bamileke. So he immigrates from the west, from his sort of, hometown to go to another province. And so I remember him telling my parents, when we did that, we were walking. So there was no car, there was no plane. And it took us about a week, right?
Wow.
And so he said, for him to go to Canada, it would take him about 15 years in a plane. And you're telling me it's far. Like, it's not. And so this is my grandparents telling my parents, who are younger, about, how the world has changed.
A very open-minded man, huh?
Very open. I mean, till today, he's my role model. Like, everything I do today, everything I am as an entrepreneur, is those lessons that I've learned from him.
And there's something almost that connects that moment, I think, to where you are now, because a lot of the research work you're doing, you're investigating small businesses, you're looking at consumer behavior.
Exactly.
It almost feels like it's a continuation of that, yeah?
It's almost feel like a full circle, because a lot of these entrepreneurs, a lot of these small businesses that I see on the continent reminds me a lot of my grandfather. Because again, you look at my grandfather, he would not fit your typical Silicon Valley kind of like profile. Yet, he was a very impactful entrepreneur, making impact in the community.
Yes.
Really having a business with huge margins. I remember when I think back now, even my business is not generating the kind of margin that my grandfather was generating.
Wow.
Literally. And so that whole sort of asymmetry of information, being able to go and buy produce, in other parts of the country.
He was able to do the arbitrage. Yeah?
Yes, and then coming back, he was at the border.
He understood it. Huh?
Let me tell you, my friend, I always think back and I look at intelligence. And here we are, we went to abroad, we went to the US, whatever, because we wanted to gather intelligence. I still don't believe that I'm more intelligent than my grandfather. Yet he did not even go to high school.
But he understood from
experience a lot about life. Business,
and
observation, right? So he was that kind of person. He would leave. He would go to like Switzerland to visit my aunt unannounced. He would fly there. He would drive, and then he would show up at the door.
Wow!
And she would completely freak out. Like, how is this man actually,
here?
Yeah, here.
Wow!
But that was the kind of person he was. And again, all of that was sort of his mindset, right? Always looking to learn. He learned Italian by just interacting with Italian priests who were coming at the store.
Wow.
And he would force them to speak Italian.
And he learned.
And so he could pick it up.
What?
Right? And so again, that really was defining moments for me growing up.
Fantastic.
Really, and spending time with him. Amazing time I spent with that man. Amazing. Wow. I'm so grateful.
I'm curious to learn, maybe let's go to the academic side of things. You chose to pursue a degree in electrical engineering. I'm just curious about that choice. What were you learning in school? How did that come about? Because obviously there's a pivot that happens at some point, right? Yeah.
So initially, I'm not supposed to be an engineer. I'm supposed to be a doctor.
Oh.
In fact, I was admitted at the Faculty of Medicine of the University of Benin in Cotonou, which I attended.
Oh, you did?
For 3 months. Until I was expelled.
Ooh, scandal.
For reasons that had nothing to do with me.
Oh, no.
But there was some political thing going on. And so we were 2 Cameroonians at the time. We both got expelled.
What?
For reasons I cannot, get into. But anyway, that happened. And that's, sensitive issues. But you can imagine at that point, my life is like, what am I going to do? I was already saying my path, to be a doctor. My parents were very happy because, African parents,
and doctor all have to be doctors. I was meant to be a doctor, by the way.
You see.
But I think academically, I did not perform at the level required.
And so, you can imagine. And so my second option was engineering.
Yes.
Right. And so that's how I basically ended up being an engineer. And even as I go to Canada, I still have the intent, because in Canada, unlike other countries where you enter a medical faculty of medicine out of high school,
yes,
in Canada you have to do a degree first.
I see, and then you go into
med school. So you can do either biology, you can even do engineering. I had a classmate who went on and became a
doctor thereafter.
Doctor.
Wow.
So even me, my intent is kind of, to go and maybe still pursue it. But I really enjoy engineering a bit better. I think that same problem solving that I've learned, growing up, I sort of found it in engineering, because really engineering is about teaching how to solve problems. If I were to summarize,
and deconstructing them.
Deconstruct, right? And sort of being systematic about it. That's what you learn from engineering. And so for me, it was also a good fit. And so I did that. And then eventually started working in a company called Nortel, in
yes.
Exactly. And then
high-speed networks and
exactly,
stuff, switches.
Exactly, switches, high-speed networks.
It was a Canadian company, yes?
It's a Canadian company.
Oh, yeah.
A Canadian success story who overnight, just burst. And so then after that, so when that happened, so I had a good friend of mine who also went to engineering but him sort of went into banking, risk management. And so I was on a call with him and he said, hey, you know what? They're also looking for engineers in banks now. So I said, oh really? I said, yeah, okay. So I said, okay, fine. What
is the context? Why did they want engineers?
So now you're talking 2007, 2005, 2006. So this is the time where if you follow sort of the financial system, that's where all the credit derivative product sort of picked up, right? It's the time where the CDO, the CLOs of this world, mortgage-backed securities, all of that securitization happened in the US, and it was a very extremely booming business. And so to be able to do that, you need quantitative analyst. Because it was pure math, literally. So how do I get a bunch of mortgages, put them together, and then sell the whole package as an instrument? And the whole sort of premises behind it was that if I sell it as an instrument, my risk, which is the risk of people not paying their mortgages, is going to always be mitigated if I construct that portfolio carefully. Because not everybody is going to default on a mortgage, number one. So if I do mortgages in this area, that area, I can sort of balance. So there's a lot of math involved in that. So the need for kind of engineers and stats and sort of math was really high. And so he followed that path. So when he told me about it, I said, hey, you know what? I think I like it. Plus, I went to school in Ottawa, a tiny city. I felt that it was getting small. So I said, yeah, I'm going to do it. So what I did then was I went back, took some courses, macroeconomics, all of those things to beef up my profile a little bit. And then I moved to Toronto, from Ottawa to Toronto. And I remember, getting there, literally not knowing anybody.
From scratch, yeah?
From scratch, being on sort of Bay Street. I went on a Friday, took appointments, or even walk-in banks unannounced.
And just introduce yourself.
And then introduce myself. And let me tell you, that day, I got probably 7 business cards. Now, the banking system in Canada is not huge. There's about 10 banks in Canada, so it's not a big, there's more banking in Kenya, actually.
Yeah.
So I got about, 7, 8 business cards.
Mm-hmm.
Very sort of, these business cards, literally, if I think about my work career, my work journey in Toronto, I applied for the first job I got in Toronto. Every other job came from those business cards.
Wow.
Again, the power of like networking, the power of following through, the power of, and again, these are things that I've learned from my grandfather, by the way.
Taking the chance. Yeah?
Taking the chance, building relationship, because it's all about human interactions, and really being consistent. Small gestures, right? Like, Happy New Year, Merry Christmas. This is what I'm doing. Literally, the first job I got in Toronto is the one where I actually went and applied. Every other job I got was people from that group calling me and saying, "Hey, are you still interested in this area?" Yeah, okay, because I see there's something here happening. I think you could be interested. They reach out to me, right? And so that's how I basically started my career in Toronto. So I went, sold everything I had in Ottawa, just moved. I remember my parents my family being panicked because, from Ottawa to Toronto, it's like moving from, I don't know, maybe Kisumu to like Nairobi.
It's a big jump.
It's like a big jump, right? And so everybody's concerned, But, I took a leap, went there, got there, I didn't even have a job. So I started applying.
Wow.
Maybe I had 2 months worth of like rent. But I knew, and that's why I've also learned in life, you have to listen to your inner self.
Intuition, yeah.
Yes, I knew that's where I needed to be.
Yeah.
I like the energy. I like the vibrancy. I felt like I was going to grow there. Within 2 weeks, I got an interview, within 2 weeks and a couple of days, I got a job offer.
Wow.
And then I was... Phew.
One thing we didn't talk about, and I meant to ask you this earlier, is, what was that transition like from Cameroon to Canada? Just that shift.
Oh, brutal. Let me tell you, I leave Cameroon, it's probably 35 degrees.
Okay.
So I arrived in Canada in January.
In the middle of winter.
And I remember leaving the airport. Literally, my body is like, like when you have, like in a steam or in a spa, right? Like the change in temperature.
It's so massive.
Oh, it was so massive.
And I'm imagining at that point, you maybe don't even have the right clothes.
No, my skin, my skin was like literally
burning.
Burning.
Oh
yeah, I had, I don't know how to call it. When the snake changes his skin?
Yeah.
Yeah, that happened literally to me.
Oh my God. That
process. Yeah, exactly.
Ooh.
So, yeah, it was, so the temperature shock or like the environment shock was there.
And then the culture as well?
And then the culture. At the time, I'm in Ottawa. So I went to Ottawa University, which is a bilingual university. And so for me, it was kind of nice.
So this one, you're more like first French, then English, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
Right? But guess what? I can't even understand their French.
It's completely different.
Yes, because it's like French from Quebec. And so I'm sitting there, I'm like, these guys are speaking French, but I can hear what they're talking about. So I had to learn that French, right? To be able to communicate.
Wow.
For the first time, I'm in school, we have professors from all kinds of places in the world, like Indians and Australians, and so everybody comes with his own accent. And now you have to kind of...
So you're like a fish out of water, right?
Exactly. You have to absorb that.
Yeah.
But then also, what I've learned, which is like the way our education system is here, is that you perform based on your own sort of capability. So my first 2 years, I tried to do the same, but I realized I wasn't performing. The reason I wasn't performing was I did not understand the game.
Oh.
By that I mean, in uni, let's say in Canada, your final mark or your final exam is, like, say, 30% of your whole mark.
Oh, it's not that
So
continuous.
there's a distribution that you need to understand
That
very
assessment,
carefully,
yeah.
right? And so your assignment, let's say that you do on a weekly basis or whatever, they award 5%. Then you've got a midterm. Then you've got, like, big labs or whatever. That allocation determines the level of energy you need to put. Which means, in me, what I was doing was I was spending too much time on assignment because I was trying to basically prove that I could do it myself. Right? By the time you get to the final exam, you're tired.
You're not pacing well, huh?
People around me, what they were doing, they were collaborating for assignments.
Oh.
So they were splitting the work.
Yes.
Yeah. So I allocate 5% of my time to that, which means I split the work. And then when the exam would come, I mean, they would go party, they would exercise me. I'm like, how are these guys doing this?
They're
Like,
spreading the load, yeah?
Yes, I don't have time. I'm always like...
Has that been instructive in your life since, the collaborative element?
Absolutely.
You don't do it alone?
Absolutely. Like, you can't, right? Like, it's really about optimization of time and capacity.
Wow.
Right? Made a huge difference. So my third year, I start having amazing marks. And then I feel relaxed, which is kind of counterintuitive from where I come from. You know?
Less
stress, more balance, right? So going into the exam, I'm rested,
Yeah.
And so that was one of my big learnings through my uni, that sort of collaboration, understanding what you've given to, like what is the brief,
Yeah.
you get, then strategizing around that before you actually go and execute.
Okay.
Right? Very, very, very important. And then we Africans, we hard workers, right? So I had no problems, going through...
And the immigrant life.
Yeah, like the immigrant life. I remember, by the first year, what you see is first year is usually like common. So you have people coming from different, students coming from different field. Coming in, we have you have one math, one biology, all of that. And then after that, you split, right? So those who go to engineering and all of that. But what you will see is, like, by the second, third semester, you see a lot of people dropping out. So if they don't have a good mark, they just drop out. But that's not who we are. We push, right? It's different mindset.
And you didn't come all this way to fail.
You didn't come all this way to basically, can you imagine calling your parents, oh, I dropped this, what? No.
It's not acceptable.
It's not acceptable. And so that was also something that I learned, and really, again, being like adapting to a new environment, adapting to a sort of a new climate, adapting to a new setting, and also, the challenges of like funding your university. I was lucky. My parents helped me. Then I had scholarship, and I was working on campus. If I missed one of those, I would be in trouble.
You're literally skating on ice, huh?
Yes. So it was literally, and that's one of the things that, I mean, mentally, it was kind of tough.
Yeah.
But also it builds your toughness as well, right?
It becomes foundational.
Yeah, it's foundational. But it was really like living on that team,
that edge, yeah?
That edge, like all the time. So yes, but again, no regrets whatsoever. I think you are who you are because of all of these experiences and how you manage to go through challenges. Yeah, because that's what builds you.
Exactly.
Ultimately, not.
And I'm sure it serves you to date, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, I mean, if you think about it, I was born in France, grew up in Africa, went to study in North America. So I've got all of that mix now. So I consider myself a citizen of the world. I don't have limits or geographical boundaries.
That's fantastic.
I don't see it like that.
Which is interesting because, again, your Africa office is actually Nairobi as opposed to Cameroon. I mean, you went where it made sense.
Absolutely.
Yeah, wow.
Right. And that is really,
So I want to switch gears. I want to talk a little bit about your time at TD. And then maybe we can talk a little bit about how that then switches you to IFC and then the beginnings of CASI.
Yeah.
Can we talk about that part of your journey?
Yeah, so my journey at TD and so my journey in the financial industry started when I, again, decided to come to Toronto. So I knew, because I had an engineering background, that I needed to boost my my finance sort of capabilities. So I did it by taking certifications and things that I have on the side. So derivatives, understanding the financial markets, the professional risk management certification, for example, all of those things to sort of boost my profile. It shows commitment, and it shows really shows commitment and really your commitment to the industry. So
Correct.
when you do that, in Canada, like it shows that you're actually really committed to the industry. So that helped me a lot. So I started with an investment company called CI Investments, so mutual funds, that kind of stuff. Literally, my first job, I was on the phone calling.
Oh, outbound sales?
Yes.
Oh, wow.
And then this is an engineering ring, by the way.
Oh.
So any engineer trained in Canada will get a ring at the end of his training. So yeah, so if you want somebody with a ring on the right small finger, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And so people will see me, and be like, what are you doing? What is an engineer doing here? But again, for me, it was always, I know where I want to be, and it's step by step. First, that job was to get myself a foot into the industry, right? I needed to put that company on my CV.
Okay.
And that was the whole purpose, while I was basically doing my certifications and my training.
Okay.
So I did that, very good job, learned a lot, even about the industry and all of that. So I did that for 2 years. Then, at the time, I was actually like vacationing in Italy with my fiance, who became my wife, get a phone call from one of my contacts, right? Remember those 7 business cards?
Yes.
Hey, Yannick, there's
presumably years later or something.
Yes, there's an opportunity here. Are you interested? He says, okay, yeah, let me check when I come back, So I go back, get on the call, get an interview, get the job. Then I get a second job, which is now at E-Trade. E-Trade
Oh, wow, E-Trade, yeah.
Who was at the time and is the pioneer in what you call DMA access, direct market access. So electronic trading. They were the pioneers of electronic trading, where you can actually trade directly to the market. So got there, got a job now as a financial engineer, which was a very interesting mix now. Sort of the progression. So now it's a mix of engineering and financial market, because they have a trading platform, and the trading platform is literally a huge router where you route trades, right? So it's an engineering, it's hardware pretty much that is supporting, right?
The ability to
do that. So that was a very nice mixed for me, and so I had still exposure to my engineering and now a bit more exposure to my trading. And so at E-Trade, I was supporting traders. I got to meet, most of the trading floors, like visit most of the trading floors on Bay Street. Got to interact with traders now, who have a very, particular sort of mentality. I remember walking into and the speed. You're now moving into a space where every second matter. Like literally.
These are day trading stuff as well, yeah?
Yeah, exactly. Right? Like you look at positions, day in, day out. Trader will call you and say, hey, I have this position now. I don't see an acknowledgement of my has this position been filled? Because E-Trade is a broker, it's an electronic broker. Right? So you're accountable for filling all of these trades. And you don't have half an hour to basically answer the guy. Because in half an hour, the trade is going to move. And if he's losing money now, you as a broker, you're going to pay for it.
Ooh.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I remember going to work with stomach pain. Let me tell you. Because you never know what's going to happen.
Wow.
Yeah? And then you finish, you're like,
you're okay.
And then you go to the, right? And I remember one day, getting in the office, my colleague is sick.
Oh. So
the stock market opens at 9:30. 9:40, we start getting calls. So traders are starting to complain about the trade being stuck. It's like, what's going on? And then there's one call, there's 2, there's 3, there's 4. So we were sitting, we had the trading desk, trading floor with the traders were there. We had the sales team on the right. And so I asked everybody now to help and sort out. And then we realized within 10 minutes, it's a wide range issue where the entire market is basically stuck. And it was literally the most, stressful.
Which year was this?
That was 2006, I believe, 2006, 2007.
Was this the global crisis?
No, that was before that.
Okay.
That was before that.
Okay.
And so that was a technical issue, by the way.
Oh.
So what had happened was the exchange did a migration the prior weekend. And with migration, right? If you've done a IT project, you know there's going to be a problem. After every migration, there's always something. And that was the Monday after the migration.
Wow.
Huge outage. And so now when it's done, so now we realize, okay, it's actually the exchange. So the exchange is working on it and all of that. Once it was done and traded resumed, you now have to reconcile all the positions. Because the guy who came in the morning and wanted to buy Nortel at $10, by the time the issue has been resolved, Nortel is now at $12. He's not going to pay the $2. You're going to have to pay the $2.
But you still have to book it for them.
So the entire reconciliation, all of that, very hectic. So that was my day. Those were my days at E-Trade. And then in between, the financial crisis happened. And at the time, if you recall, E-Trade in the US had bought a big portfolio of mortgage-backed securities. Wow. So even though they were sort of an electorate, they were trying to become a bank, and sort of they got exposed to that. So the company was on the shaky ground. And then I got a call from TD. Right, so I got a call from TD, someone in HR, and she said, "Okay, are you interested in this?" I said, "Okay, fine." So I go there, interviews, and so I got a job. I got a job there, and at the time for me it was I want a bit more stability, because now I'm thinking about getting married and stuff. I want to work for a bank because you can do so many things.
More reliable.
Yeah, it's more reliable. These are stronger organization. So I went, did the interview, and sort of started working for the credit product group.
Yes.
Doing sort of risk management. 2 weeks in the job, I go to the office and then I see a news report, and the bank is headline, right? So TD has $100 million write down, for
Lehman Brothers
electronic. That was like a illicit trading.
This is another thing. Before
illicit trading in the London desk.
Wow.
And I'm in the thick of it because it is my group. It is. The risk management fell. That's why we did not capture the fraud that happened at the time. So all of a sudden, I now have to deal with senior management, including sort of the CEO of the bank. Because when that happened, the first thing you have to do is you have to show the street it's contained. And you show it's contained by making sure it's not just saying it's contained. You have to prove it. You have to go, you have to reconcile all your positions. And we're not talking about basic financial products here. We're talking about CDOs, CLOs, all of that. So that reconciliation basically took me probably 2 days. I remember going to the office on a Friday. I left the office the Saturday morning at 9, literally working
non-stop.
And that was me 2 weeks in the job and we're now in the thick of the financial crisis and all of that. So the learning curve, very steep. Very, very steep. But I spent 2.5 years within that group, and then I started moving into other groups. Still probably the best 2.5 years of my career in banking.
Fantastic.
The amount of knowledge, the amount of challenge intellectually, dealing with these products. Banking used to be fun. Now it's not anymore. But these were the last days of exciting banking.
Yes,
if you ask me.
Yes.
Because after that, regulation came, everything became so rigid and sort of so that was, and then at the time I sort of started looking at Africa, what can I do, things like that, and then essentially thought about what is it that I had a mentor who used to say to me, when you want to know what you want to do or what if you want to become an entrepreneur or anything like that, ask yourself, if you had a magic stick, you could do anything, what would you do? And so at the time, for me, it was, I want to do something, in Africa. I want to do something around data, in Africa. and then sort of started working through, what it would look like. And it had different forms. So what the company is today is not what the original ideas was.
Some pivoting
along the way. But I started this, while I was still working. And so initially it was all about, collecting data, but the types of data was different. I wanted to build a basket to sort of report and track inflation. And so I remember sending my brothers to, I had a list of product. They go to the market every weekend, they collect, and then I would put together a basket and I put together an index. And so I did it for 6 months. I sent the data
to the professor. This is for Cameroon now?
Cameroon, yeah. This is Cameroon. So I sent the data to a professor. And then he's like, yeah, it's useless. And I'm like, why? And then he says, for each product, you need at least, I think, something like 100 observation to be able to compute. And so now I'm doing the math around the amount of work and money it would require to do all of that. I'm like, no, that's not going to work. Then I had to pivot to something else. Then I pivoted to sort of survey data, and that's how I.
So this at this point, does CASI exist yet?
No, it's a pet project. Yeah, it's informal. It's it's not a, it's really not a company or anything like that. So then when I pivoted to survey data, then I sent him again some of our data, and then it's like, okay, fine, this can work. He's actually the one who actually pushed me to incorporate the company.
Okay.
So I incorporated the company because he wants now to be.
Are you still at TD now?
I'm still at TD.
Okay.
Yes, I'm still at TD.
Moonlighting.
Yeah, this is me weekends and
evenings
after work, evenings. Yeah. So I'm still at TD. So I'm doing piloting, doing all of these things. And then eventually in 2016, I think I said, you know what, I'll take this seriously. So 2016 pushed the sort of data capability. So we started in Cameroon. Mm-hmm. I know you're going to come to it, but I'm going to basically jump ahead. Why Kenya? So when I started this, as a typical diaspora, right, I thought about back home.
Your own market.
Right? Your own market. Because you're like, yeah, I know my market. I mean, I'm from there,
It's a comfort level, huh?
So-called comfort level. Because I went to hell. Cameroon was tough, very difficult to find people. It was, and so this is me sitting with a very good colleague of mine who's from Kenya at TD. And we're having lunch, right? And I'm renting with you now. And she's like, wow, by the way, I have my cousin in Nairobi. He's also an engineer like you. Maybe you should talk to him and see what you guys can do. And so that's how I, connected with the guy who's now my partner, Martin, here.
Okay.
And then I discovered Kenya. And the speed at which we were able to do things here kind of blew my mind.
Really? Much better than Cameroon.
Exactly. Yeah. The quality of the talent, all of that. And it was the first time for me to realize that Africa was bigger than Cameroon. Because at that point, I still equate Africa to Cameroon, which is a mess, unfortunately.
So you start to see the bigger picture now.
I start to see the bigger picture.
Wow.
And I'm like, wow, can Africa be this different? Are there people living in the same continent? Really? Then I was like, wow, completely blown away. And that's how I basically said.
What is the underlying driver behind this effort? What are you trying to accomplish at this point?
So it goes back to the inception. So for me, I spent my career in banking with, data sources, Bloomberg terminal. If you're a trader, you have, Bloomberg, Reuters, all of that. You make decisions based on those data.
Information.
Yeah. If you're a central banker, you have all kinds of data available at your disposal. And I've always felt that it's a huge competitive advantage. You don't know, you can manage what you can't measure. Ultimately, right? And I look at the continent and I'm like, should we even sometimes blame sort of leaders and all of that? Because what is the feedback loop that they actually have? What if they just
efforts and the initiatives and all this?
What if they actually, driving blind? And
basically, there's no measurement.
There's no measurement. So
it's opinion, conjecture,
it's exactly
sentiment.
Right. How often do our countries actually do census? There's a benchmark, and then there's actually what happens.
Let's look at even just current scenarios. If you think about political sentiment, there's overwhelmingly, it seems in Kenya, this view of late that everything is corrupt.
Yeah.
But if you looked at actual metrics
Yeah.
and you said, like somebody I saw the other day on Facebook said, let's give credit where credit is due.
Yes.
I can see this, I can see that, I can see these metrics. Then these are people who've actually gone into the background and understood what is the data actually saying versus the opinion or sentiment of people.
Right?
Yeah.
And that's, difference between signal and noise. Now, if and the idea was, can I sit in Toronto and have on the ground real-time data
of what's happening
on the continent? That's really, this is where this all started. For me, it was, I want to be sitting in Toronto in my computer and I want to get real-time data. Like
for who and for what, though? Yes. For who and for what?
So, and the idea is, I want to actually understand what's happening in Africa. And I don't want to understand it through the lens of, the World Bank and then, all that macro data that we're getting, because there is a gap between that and reality. And we've seen this over and over and over. In any modern economies, you have what you call macro data and micro data, top-down data and bottom-up data. The understanding of the economy and the truth is in between.
Yes.
But you find in Africa, we usually tend to have those macro data. And somebody famously said, nobody is GDP. But if you assess the country by understanding consumer sentiment, it's much, much more tangible. Much, much more tangible. Because these are people on the ground telling you, hey, I'm confident about me getting a job, having an income, paying for my entertainment, all of that.
Shopping data.
And if you combine all of that, that is a better picture of what's happening actually in the country. And so for me, it was that, and then focusing on primary data, speaking to people to get that sort of understanding, and then being able to have a platform where I can basically present that. Now, to get there, it was many, many different steps. Because the first is like, can you even get that data? The second is like, when you get the data, can you harmonize it properly? Third, can you build a platform where you can actually see it? Fourth, can you analyze that data and make sense? Fifth, do you have enough trend to validate that information?
And pattern recognition, yeah?
Exactly, right? So when you think about it, it's a 9-year process.
And you felt that this value, or rather aggregating it, analyzing it, bringing out those key insights, somebody somewhere needs this.
Absolutely, because here I'm sitting in Canada, in the US, and I can see how this information is making people have better decisions, make more money, all of that. So I know it's just a matter of time in Africa before we get to that point.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, what you're saying is that you could already see how that value of that information, those metrics and so forth, was already bringing value in those markets.
Absolutely.
So you're thinking, well, Africa has a clear gap in this space.
Yes.
If I can overlay that same model using African data for the African market, it could be useful for an international investor.
Absolutely.
Could be useful for local governments.
Absolutely.
Or brands.
Yes.
And now you could almost say, I'm creating what I see here already.
Exactly.
Okay.
Right? And so it was about, that was giving me a sense of the future. And then how do you basically build that future? So you have to build the ground infrastructure.
From the ground up, huh?
Right, exactly. And
it didn't exist.
Yeah, it didn't exist. And so for me, from day one, I always knew this was going to be a long road. You see, like, I never started this company thinking, you know what, I'm going to be
overnight success story.
Yeah, like a unicorn in 5 years or whatever. No, never.
Right? It was almost like a mission.
Yes. Okay. So for me, I knew. But the other thing I also know is like data is like wine. The older it gets, the more expensive it is. And so if you think about what we do today, let's just even talk about competition. If you want to compete with us, you have to show not 1, not 2, not 3, 10 years of historical primary data.
Validated,
collected, validated, high quality, validated across not 1, not 2, not 3, 7 to 20 countries on the continent, right? If you think about that process, you can't go back and recreate data, like primary data. Because you can't go back and resurvey people back in 2020. Once it's done, it's done. So even if I give you $1 billion, you can't replicate what we have.
And that's actually a moat, yeah? It gives
And that
you a
is
boundary.
the moat,
Yes.
Moses. That is the moat. So that's why, for me, that patience, I had no intent to be actually in a hurry, because that is what is becoming the moat. And now the more you do it, the more year you add it, the more you're adding to your moat, and the more sort of irreplaceable you become. You get? And the more insight, the more data, the more, right? And so I always say, and I know we're going to talk about decisions intelligence. That's decisions intelligence. The difference is, I always say, it's market research 2.0. And decisions intelligence is market research moving at the speed of business.
Yes.
Right? And so you move at the speed of business if you can have context, which is historical data, insight, which is you being able to tell me what's happening today. And then because you have those two, foresight. I'm not going to give you 3 versions of the future that are rooted in context, insight, so that you can now drive forward. So it's no longer about, our sales are dropping, and then they're dropping because, there was a pandemic in 2020. Like, what do I do? What do I do tomorrow about that information? Like, I'm not interested in what happened yesterday. Me, I want to know what I'm going to do tomorrow.
Hence predictive analytics.
Exactly. Right? But you can only do that if you have
the foundation of that.
Foundation, right? Of, the past.
And of course, because you worked in financial ecosystems, you guys had 50, 60s, 100 years worth of data.
Absolutely.
And you could almost say we're seeing a parallel to what happened in 1957.
Absolutely.
This becomes a precursor to this.
And so
typical behavior suggests these are the outcomes.
There you go.
And that means, obviously people in financial systems, they can actually literally map the future.
Absolutely. And if you listen to Bloomberg media, for example, or like all of these business media, just listen to the guest. It's always about context and foresight. Right? Or the Iran war is happening. Okay, what's happening now?
They're already talking about what happened in the Strait of Hormuz in 1988.
Yes.
They're using that parallel to inform the future.
But now they're telling you, okay, now this is what's going to happen, right?
Yeah.
If this thing lasts for more than a month, we expect all prices to go
5 possible scenarios.
To go like this. If this happened, this is, and that's the capability we're bringing.
Which did not exist in Africa.
No.
Wow. So decision intelligence.
That is decisions intelligence, right? It's not, and again, through our evolution, we were a data collection company, we're a market research company, but the real company that I'm building is a decisions intelligence company.
But you have to have these layers.
The
stack has to be built.
The stack has to be built.
Wow.
So now we have the stack. The stuff that you saw that we produced on Kenyan banking and NPLs. You can only do that if you have all of those 2 things.
So I want to, because we don't have too much time, but I want us to kind of sharpen a little bit on this, because I want to understand, because you've kind of painted a picture a little bit forward, but there's Cassie, the idea, the concept. We're now seeing what birthed it, how it came to be. I want to understand a little bit about some of the mechanics in terms of, who needs this intelligence? How do you start to build a business case around what you're doing so that now we can see going forward where you are today?
Yeah.
Yes.
No, I think, and the business case for this particular, for decisions intelligence, it's still a business case that we're building. Because if you think about the model, companies are used to market research, they're used to consulting,
yes,
and all of that. And so you have to go from that to now saying, we can now augment your team and give you access to decisions intelligence that can inform forward sight and all of that. And so that is a process that's ongoing. Now, what is happening today, and again, it takes, like any sort of blue ocean kind of project, there's a lot of that sort of education, there's a lot of that showing, right? So that people can actually believe that is happening.
You're literally creating the market.
You're literally creating the market. Now, the context is interesting because now, with the volatility, the uncertainty, all of that, the competition, right? One of the things that's happening on the continent now is you have increased competition. So a lot of the incumbents who used to be really fine, even if my sales are dropping, I'm still number one. So I don't have any problems. But now your sales are dropping, but they're not just dropping. They're dropping and you're at risk at losing your top seat. So you find there's an increased awareness about the need for intel and quick. There's really, because people realize consumers are changing. And I always say consumers and people are moving faster than brand. The brands are now waking up to the point where they need to match that, right? And your assumption about where the consumer today is no longer the case, because we've been exposed, we get so much information that we are flipping or literally making those decisions and changes as we go. And it happens very quickly. If you're in an environment where there's healthy competition, it becomes super important now. So we're seeing with what's happening geopolitically, what's happening, that there's an increase. I mean, foresight, I can't remember how many times I've heard this from clients and prospects. We're not interested in even market research anymore. We want foresight. What are we going to do on Monday? Like, that's what we want to know.
How does this impact our business?
Impact our business? Like, what are we going to do?
Yeah.
And so that is happening. I think the other thing that needs to happen is, and this is why I'm here, is we need to do a better job as a company to tell
educate
people
the
that
marketplace.
Yes, we are here. It is possible. You know, I had call with prospects where I showed them the data, and at the end of the call, they asked me if it's actually real data. So it tells you the distance, that people have no idea this kind of capability exists on the continent. And by the way, there are continents like Latin America who don't even have this kind of capability. Yes. This is really quite. So
it almost sounds to me like you're building a company or business or a proposition for the future in a sense, because you had the foresight, you're creating this blue ocean, you've sort of aligned with where the market is going to be at some point. And then the key competitive advantage will be those who have the insights, not even the data.
Yeah.
The insights derived from the data that then supports how they operate as a business. Understanding the consumer, understanding the market trends, et cetera. Yeah. And you've done this across 21 markets in Africa.
Yeah.
What is the actual methodology to do this? Because I imagine it's literally boots on the ground.
Yes, it is.
You've got to collect, you've got to have good systems for data capture, data analysis.
Yeah.
Is this something that you've built from the ground up?
Absolutely. Bit by bit, country by country. And again, I always say, think about Safaricom.
Yes.
Why is Safaricom so dominant in this continent? It's because one of your first founders, I can't remember his name, was an engineer.
Michael Joseph, yeah.
Yes, he went and built those towers bit by bit. That's why today you have Safaricom. There's no magic. There's no shortcut.
I always wondered by this, for this, one of the key decisions in the very early days was they went with per second billing versus per minute.
Exactly.
And apparently that was already a crazy decision. Or they launched the scratch cards first.
Yes.
Versus the competitor who launched a postpaid model.
Yeah.
And overtook them with that decision.
Exactly. Right? And so infrastructure is key, because the other reason is, so remember we were talking about the moat, right? Like the data is the moat. But your infra is also your moat. You get? And for me, I want to control my whole supply chain. Because it gives me, it protects me, right? So data collection, I have 1,500 people on a monthly basis. We incentivize every
across the markets.
Yes, we incentivize everybody. It's not an online-only collection, because people always assume.
This is Africa.
But again, this is Africa, right? So there is a big infrastructure sort of that we incentivize all of our respondents. And I always say to people, probably one of the biggest FDI on this continent with direct, money going directly to, the people. And then we, again, from there, sort of quality checks, all of that. Then we build our own platform. Because again, this is not data, this is survey data. Yes, and this is survey data, which is, if you think about it, when you take a survey and you want to now build data series or historical data around it, it's very different than getting transaction data and saying you want to build a historical series around that, right? So all of that also had to be built from scratch. Even the platform that we had, right? And I always say sometimes being broke as an entrepreneur is probably a good thing.
You learn how to be creative and innovative.
Yes.
And
the platform, I thought about your typical Microsoft Power BI, your typical Tableau, but it was just too expensive. I said, for me to have users, I need to pay Tableau at least $29.99 before I can actually make money. There's no way that's going to work for me, right? And so it was because of that I basically came up with this platform that we have today.
which is open source.
Yes, and it's ours.
You build the code base all up to
exactly
what it is today.
So it's very unique because when I show it to people, they're like, "Oh, we've never seen something like that." Yeah, of course you've never. Yeah. Because it was uniquely built for our unique challenges, pretty much.
So who are your customers? What's the profile of the people who buy this data or the insights you share?
So we have customers, like you mentioned, right? So we have the likes of Bloomberg and Reuters. They buy data sets. So we literally send them data sets and then they use it.
And they plug it into
on their own platforms. We have banks,
Africans,
Pan-Africans, who are now basically starting to leveraging our decision intelligence capabilities, right? Where we now, it's really like team augmentation. So imagine you have this whole infrastructure now on your back, right? Where you can get monthly, literally, change of what's happening in the market. You can get quarterly stuff that's happening in the market. And we have clients, literally, by the time they started working with us, within 3 months, I get a call. Here in Kenya, I get a call. Hey, Yannick, I have a problem. So what's happening? People think I'm a magician in the bank. Because you've shown them the data, the intel. And now they see the possibility. So now they come up with other.
So even creating products, revising
things. Let's look at this, let's look at that. And so it makes for much, much more. So banks, and then we have your usual FMCGs. You've got retail, telcos. Safaricom is our client. You have, and then you have like your NGO. We've done a lot of work with the Gates Foundation during COVID.
The non-profits and all.
Yeah, we were the first to track COVID-19 in Africa.
Wow.
Yes. And so what happened with COVID
So you've got data sets across different scenarios, yeah?
Oh, yeah. Because when COVID happened, and the way it happened is our consumer sentiment index, we track it and we comment it on a monthly basis. So December 2019, we start to see the index dropping. So now we ask ourselves, is the pandemic, which is a Chinese issue, impacting Africans? And is it because there's a lot of tie between Africa and China that is actually impacting us? And so we look at it as an opportunity for African brands to actually capture that opportunity now. And is there an opportunity?
Yes.
Fast forward 3 months after, it's a global pandemic, it hits Africa. Everybody's looking for data. During COVID, I was doing weekly webinar. And let me tell you, so when that happened, I panicked first because I had just quit my job, doing this full time. Then I'm like, okay, what do I have to do now to stay relevant? Then I said to myself, okay, we as a brand, let's kind of be the light in this moment of like uncertainty. So what we started doing was we're doing sort of monthly, weekly
briefings on what's happening.
Briefing on what's happening, right? I was in South Africa 2 weeks ago, Moses. I had a CMO breakfast. And I had my badge, right? And then I met this guy, a guy and a lady. They see my badge, they see the name. You know what they say? Oh, Cassie from COVID. I was watching your webinar every day.
Cassie from COVID.
Yes.
Wow.
And so for me, it really proved that, and that's the power of data, by the way, and Intel. North America or all of these markets, if you look at the stock market, it goes up and down.
Yes.
Right? But that's not the point. People will still invest in the US even despite what's happening now.
Yes.
Because they have visibility
into what's really going on.
Yes. They will see when it's going to pick up and they'll get in before. Right? That visibility is that data. Right? And so it brings confidence in the market because you give visibility. Opportunity because now, as you saw with the NPLs, I can look at consumer sentiment and predict NPLs.
Wow.
And I can position myself, right? One of our index is also predicting returns in the GSE in Johannesburg, right? So again, now you have all of those tools at your disposal to really now capture opportunity. So we hope to see more opportunity being captured, right? As opposed to the Africa where we see it's always the Africa rising, but we're not rising at the speed at which we should be rising. You get? And I think that gap is being able to spot and capture those opportunities quickly, right? And for that, you need data. You need metrics. You need
Yeah. So I have another question here, because I think you've told us who's buying the data and why they're buying it. But also, what is it that separates you from, presumably you might have competitors, maybe not. I know that, I've attended events recently like PAMRO and SOMAR, and I've sort of gotten sucked into the research space around consumer research. And it just feels like there's a lot of companies. But what is it that makes you different from these other guys?
I think it's the approach first, right? Your typical research company will basically do a project or collect data when you come as a client and you tell them, I have a problem. They won't proactively go and do it themselves. So the model itself is different, right?
So you're not a reactive.
So exactly. That reactive versus proactive. That's number one.
So you're investing ahead of demand.
Absolutely. When we talk about staying ahead of the curve, we are not joking. Like, you're really staying ahead of the curve. We can show you the curve, and we can actually show you how you stay ahead of it.
Wow.
Right? Practically, you understand?
Yeah, I get you.
So that's number one. So the model is different. Number two, people think, our sort of capability is sort of like the data and all of that. No, it's the intel. The process of getting that data and turning it into like intelligence that is relevant for your company, it's an art. And I think for the last 7 years, we spent our time perfecting that art. So when people, our IP is not even the data anymore. It's really that capability to basically take that data, make sense out of it. How do you connect all the dots?
Yeah.
How do you connect all the dots?
Yeah.
Right? To tell you, to give you the clarity of what you're going to do next and why you have to do it.
It's so interesting because just this week we had a meeting with one of our new clients, and they had the US director visiting, and she was very explicit. Listen, I don't want reports.
Yeah.
I want insights. And she's like, look, don't give me graphs. I want to know, what does the data mean and what does it mean that we do next? Absolutely. And I think that conversation at C-level is very clear now, globally. Clear. We are beyond getting inundated by data. We want to know the 3 to 5 key highlights of what this data means for us. And then what actions do we take? And I was actually quite surprised because I had a follow-up meeting today. And they were reflecting on the data and insights we shared based on what we're seeing as global trend. And they're saying, yes, we're going to go with that and that you told us to do. And that was really profound. I was almost like, what? You mean our suggestion has been adopted?
Yes.
And I think that's what people need now. They need insight. And that's, I think, what Cassie brings.
Yeah, you need a point of view.
Yeah.
Like there is because your clients are looking for clarity.
Yeah.
Ultimately.
And people are drowning in data.
And people are drowning in data. You extract the noise.
Yeah.
You get the signal and you give them the clarity. Very simple. I always tell my team, our job, people will pay us because we simplify all of this data into very simple slides. 5, 10, max. Which are actionable.
Yeah.
Right? So I always love when I do a presentation and my clients leave after or before we wrap up. Your client is able to summarize what you've basically just discussed.
Wow.
So if I understand properly, number 1, you have to do this. Number 2, you have to do it. Number 3, you've done your job.
Yeah.
Because he can walk out of that desk and meet his CEO now.
And the next steps, yeah.
Yes, next step.
Yeah.
With clarity.
So it seems to be like really almost early in the journey of Cassie Insights in a way, because it sounds to me like probably in 10 years, if we have this conversation, the business looks different. And this is what my next question is. Where do you see in the next 2 to 5 to 10 years, where do you see Cassie going?
I think next 5 to 10 years, the best way for me to summarize it, I think we have the opportunity to become the Bloomberg of the continent.
Wow.
Very close. Very close.
Very parallel, very similar in the way you execute.
Very similar.
And the same quality.
Yes. And then you're going to see, very early, some of those popping up.
Wow.
But, and then, we have a very good relationship with Bloomberg, as a company. But I think when you combine our data capability, right? When you combine sort of insight capability, you then need to stack 1 or 2 things on top of it to now become that kind of a platform. Bloomberg is a data company, and then have media as distribution, right? And that's how it works. And so if you think about it, once you have the data, then it's a matter of like how do you distribute. How do you influence?
Which products do you build around that?
Product you build around it, right?
Yeah.
And so we see ourselves being very much embedded in the financial industry.
Wow. Okay.
Doing some exciting, work in South Africa to really build product, like financial product, and that you can now basically trade or within the financial industry.
Wow.
See ourselves building more indices, shaping up what the picture of the continent is, with really, and really you're looking at it from a different lens. I don't look at boundaries. I don't look at geography or even country. Like, I don't believe in that construct. I believe in what that whole data stack across all of these markets is telling me. That's my segmentation. That's my aggregation. And I think, in the future, I hope, we get towards that place where you can play now, and you can look at the continent in a very different way. And because you look at the continent in a very different way, you can unpack a lot more opportunities, right? And so it's a combination of having access to intelligence, real time, combination of having access to expertise, like that, and really be as dominant as a Bloomberg on the continent.
Wow. Well, it looks like we're practically at the end of our time, and I think almost like we probably have a second follow-up podcast. I think I'd love us to go with maybe a bit granular into the intelligence platform and so forth, and maybe that's something we'll get to do.
Yeah.
But I think maybe as we sort of wrap up our conversation, are there any sort of nuggets of wisdom that you might want to share with those who might be watching or listening to this, in terms of whether it's the business leaders, whether it's the maybe the young people who maybe are looking at careers in this area of decision intelligence? Are there any 1, 2, 3 nuggets that you'd like to leave our audience with?
So I'll focus on the youth, because I'm a big believer in the youth. A lot of the work that we do, people don't realize, is done by Gen Z. Out of uni. Me, I hire out of uni.
Young people, huh?
Absolutely. So they really need to believe in themselves, which I think they do. But I think they also need to really be conscious about what it takes. Have very, do not compromise on the quality of your work ethic, challenging yourself, right? Day in and day out.
Yeah.
Right? And also challenging the status quo. We have to find new ways of doing things on the continent.
Yes.
In fact, it's the only way. I would argue, if you think you're going to leverage infrastructure, you're going to leverage existing capital, good luck. This is not the continent where you can do it. You can do it in America, you can do it in Europe, but here you can't. Which means you have the opportunity to really build, infra. And when you build infra, it's your ultimate IP, because if I play your game, I'm always going to be one step behind, because it's your game. You have the rules, you know everything, right? And so for the youth, and I just focused on the youth, really, work ethic, be bold, but also get down to the business and sort of work. The notion that we need capital to basically build company on the continent is wrong. I built this company, I think initially I was using my own salary, $10,000, never raised institutional money for this company. And here I am.
This thing of raising around.
You see all the clients that we have, all of that. Like, it did not prevent us from getting those clients that we have today, right? So you have the ability to basically do that, and you can start with what you have, right? And if you look carefully, even in these markets, I'm a big proponent of the informal, or what we call the informal, because I don't even believe in that concept. But I'm a big believer in our market, because that is really our market. And for all the young people out there, go and spend, a day or two with one of those ladies who are basically selling food to construction workers, all of that, and understand their business. And what you're going to find will blow your mind, and really change the way you look at these women and opportunities on the continent, right? Really,
the real Africa.
Exactly. It's really going to change. And so that's my, really parting shot for the youth. The youth also, because I believe, the companies who would basically I don't know, pay us $1 million to do what we do are not yet born. These young people are going to be the one building it. Me, I'm a long-term guy.
You're building the foundation.
Yes, I'm not a rush. I mean, rushing for what? We talked about it last time.
Yes.
We're probably not going to see the Africa of our dream in our lifetime, right? So let's do at least what we can do good, well, while we're here, and then the next generation is going to take over and do it. So really having a long term, a good appreciation for the continent. There's a lot of innovation out there. Like, it's not always outside. In fact, I would argue it's inside.
Yes.
Right? It's inside. Have the humility to go and look and learn. Like the same way I learned with my grandparents, and having that humility to learn and how they learn themselves. Everything is out there, really. You just have to live, and we are blessed to live in a wonderful continent on top of it. So
wow. Yannick, thank you so much.
No
this
problem.
has been a wonderful conversation. Started on LinkedIn, came to Nairobi, ended up in this studio, and I'm just grateful. And I honestly think we still have a second part to this conversation because we didn't quite get into, I think, the meat around the intelligence and the research
for sure.
and what it means going forward. But I think we have enough here that our audience can see that there is a new dimension here. There is something profound that you're putting together. I love the African founded. I love the African driven, even the platform, the excellence with which you're doing this work, the fact that you've connected your diaspora experience to an African opportunity, I think is fantastic. And I think also just the parting shot, which I think is so valid at this point in time, which is, again, there's this concept of Africa rising, but it's going to be driven by our Gen Zs and these other generations to follow. But the fact that they need to be excellent, they need to be curious, they need to really see what Africa is on the ground, and then understand the opportunities that are uniquely African so that they can take advantage of that. They don't have to look out, they just have to look within. I think that's a profound insight you just shared there. And thank you so much.
No problem. Thank you, Moses.
So there you have it from Yannick Lefang. Wonderful, wonderful conversation around decision intelligence and the way that he's building probably the first company of its kind for a Pan-African opportunity and a Pan-African customer base, both on the consumer and the business side, and also people like development partners who are benefiting from what they do. And I really hope that by having this opportunity to be a part of this conversation, you've take away some insights, some valuable perspectives, and more importantly, go online, have a look at Cassie Insight and see what they're doing. And hopefully, we'll catch you in the next one. Thank you so much for joining us for this edition of the Pure Digital Passion Podcast. We will catch you in the next one.